When we talk about firewall architectures, we're talking about where do I place firewalls in my system. And I have 4 of them here: the perimeter packet filter, screen host, Dualhomed host, and screen subnet. So let's take a look at all 4 of those. First, the perimeter packet firewall. These are the very simple ones. I've got my network here, I've got the rest of the world here, and I simply put a firewall here. This is likely what you have at home with your wireless router, for example. Second is the screen to host. In this case, I've got this computer here. Here's my internal network. Here's a firewall appliance, and here's the internet. But I've got this computer right here that is acting as a screened host, and it can be doing additional filtering. In fact, taking the load maybe off of this. This can even be what we call a Bastion host. Now, a Bastion host is a server that has been hardened. And by hardened, we mean everything that is not necessarily stripped down, so it can withstand a lot of attack. And by it taking the attack, it takes the heat off of these guys in here. It can also be, for example, a honeypot. Now, a honeypot would have enough information on it that would look like my internal network, and thus attract the bad guy. He would think he's broken in. Meanwhile, I can observe the actions of that bad guy. A third type is what we would call the dual-homed or multi-homed server. Now, in order to be a firewall, remember we talked about firewall systems earlier, where I buy a system off the shelf and then I turn it into a firewall through software, into a hardware firewall. Well, in order for that to happen, it's got to have at least 2 different network interface cards, one to go to one network, one to go to the other network. Some servers have more. In this case, you see a server that has 4 network connections in it. These are called dual-homed or multi-homed server, and you would have to have it dual or multi-homed in order for this thing to serve as a hardware firewall or as a firewall system. Finally is what we call the screened subnet, also known as a DMZ or demilitarized zone. The idea of these is to have an intermediate network that these guys out here, the world, can reach. Let's say that this is a web server here. So as the people on the internet want to reach my web server, they can do that through some rules in my firewall here. But if I need to change my web pages, for example, I have access from my internal network through the firewall to get to them. So I have 2 different paths here through this firewall to these web servers. Now, this is not the best, the absolute best situation. Here's a better one down here. In this case, I've got an external firewall and an internal firewall. So the internet actually out here has to go through this firewall and these rules in order to get to my web server. And my internal network has to go through a different set of rules to get to my web server. And now it's doubly protected. You can see to get from the external network to my internal network, they have to get through 2 firewalls. So this is particularly strong. So that is the 4 types of firewall architectures.